The digital workflow, I suppose, refers to everything that we do, from taking the photographs, setting up the camera, through to ingestion onto the computer, processing, and then final output. So I'm going to run through the way I work, my digital workflow. So initially, the camera setup. Before I go out, I clean the camera and lenses if they need it. I check the sensor for contamination, especially if I've done something where there's the possibility that the sensor could have got dirty on a previous excursion. I format the memory cards in camera. Now you've got to make sure that all the pictures have been put onto the computer before you do this, but formatting the memory cards in the camera rather than just deleting them maybe on the computer, and that sets the cards up in the way best suited for that particular camera, and you probably get less glitches and things if you do that. Set to RAW, so I don't set the camera to anything else other than for very specific purposes, like producing images for the web or something. But for anything useful or important, everything is saved as a raw file. I usually set the color temperature to auto white balance, because when you're using a raw file it makes absolutely no odds. You can convert or change it later on with no quality loss. Spare batteries, I make sure I've got plenty of spare batteries fully charged, ready to go. And spare memory cards. So the usual mantra is make sure you've got at least 3 times the amount of batteries and cards that you think you're going to need for the shoot. Go on your shoot. Enjoy your hobby, basically. Use appropriate techniques to ensure image sharpness, correct exposure, and you can check the histogram on the back to give you a bit of an idea as to whether the exposure is correct or not. I never ever delete or edit images in camera. I've seen too many people press the wrong button and delete their entire card, so it just doesn't make sense. It's always better to do that on the computer when you get back. Workstation. You need a neutral kind of workstation, neutral colored workstation, so that your eyes don't accommodate to incorrect colors and things, and I cover all this lot later on in the book and the videos. You need to calibrate your monitor, set up Photoshop, set up Bridge, set up Adobe Camera Raw, and again I go into all of these things later on in the book, but these are important to set up first before you start processing your images. Download your images, back up your images. So before I even start deleting stuff, I back them up so that at least they're in 2 places at the same time. So if something goes wrong with the main drive, at least they haven't lost everything. I then go through a process of ranking and sorting the images, getting rid of the duffers and maybe star rating certain ones that I wish to process later on. And then I process the images, and I do most of the work in the Adobe Camera Raw converter, including a bit of pre-sharpening. In Photoshop, so these are just general principles, work in Pro Photo RGB color space, work in 16 bits per channel, that's the bit depth, and work non-destructively. And I save all the work that I've done in Photoshop as a Photoshop file. I might have to output it to a JPEG or something later on, but any important work I save as an unflattened, that's with all the layers intact, Photoshop file. And these attributes, these Pro Photo RGB 16 bits per channel, they're all assigned in Adobe Camera Raw when you're processing the image and sending it to Photoshop. And I'll be going through all those in the future part of the book and the videos. Then for anything that's going to print, final sharpen for print, size to the required dimensions, crop and things, but I never reinterpolate the image. I always leave the pixel numbers exactly as they were. Save for print and use printer profiles for the printing. This ensures that the color consistency all the way through from camera all the way through the system, and I'll be going through profiles and that as part of the book. Digital projection. This is where you need to interpolate, get rid of pixels to the dimensions required for the projector in use. Now this is a full high definition one, 1920 by 1080. This is like the the WPF's projector pixel dimensions currently. Final sharpen for projection, because it's going to be a total different amount of sharpening than it is for printing. Okay, so you start off with your master file, go to print, master file, go to digital projected image. You'll need to convert it to 8 bits per channel. Save it in the sRGB color space, because this is what's needed for digital projection. And you need to save it as a JPEG file or an unflattened TIFF file if that's what's specified. And you need to use the required file naming convention, especially if you enter into competitions and things. So that's just a quick run through of the way I manage my digital workflow.